So what you just saw there was me attempting to hit a John McEnroe or Jimmy Connors forehand, and you're probably thinking, Nick, they look exactly the same. Yeah, probably that's what it looks like, and I'm having a hard time replicating these forehands that are tough to pull off. But basically we're talking about more of a traditional forehand that has more of a traditional grip. It is a continental grip or close to it. It doesn't have a loop. This forehand, the racket goes straight back. The one difference between a Jimmy Connors forehand and a John McEnroe forehand was that John McEnroe likes to be a little bit more straight up. He gets a lot of momentum from the incoming ball, and he gets a lot of momentum from the racket swinging forward and from the torso rotation, where Jimmy Connors would load a little bit more on his ground stroke. He used to bend his upper body and he would draw a little bit more energy from his body. So that is probably the biggest difference between those two forehands. But why am I even talking about Jimmy Connors and John McEnroe's forehand when obviously all the modern players hit the forehand completely different? They have a loop on their shot. They're using their body in a very violent way. They're becoming airborne. Why in the heck am I talking about Jimmy Connors and John McEnroe? Well, I received a very interesting question in one of my latest forehand videos. And the question was, Nick, would you fix John McEnroe's and Jimmy Connors' forehand? And before I answer that question, I want to tell you a quick story about my college coach, Mel Purcell. So for you guys that don't know, I played Division I college tennis at Murray State University. I had the pleasure of being coached by one of the greatest players ever called Mel Purcell. He was a quarter finalist at Wimbledon. He was ranked 21 in the world. He was such a talented player that many people have told me that Mel could have easily been ranked in the top 10 in the world. This is how talented Mel Purcell was. And when I was in college, Mel still competed on the senior tour. It was called the New Veen Tour back in those days, and he did really well. He was ranked number 2 in the world behind Jimmy Connors, and we had the pleasure of watching Mel compete against some of the legends of the game. And I remember vividly that at one of these tournaments, Mel was hitting with somebody at a club where the tournament was hosted. And this was just a random person. I'm not sure if this was a coach or just someone who was a player at the club. But in any case, Mel was telling us a story about how he was taking some volleys, and this person that he was hitting with was giving him tips on the volley and tried to correct his form. And Mel thought that this was the most hilarious thing ever, and we took it as a very funny thing back in the day. So you're probably thinking, Nick, what is wrong with somebody giving tips? This is maybe well meant. Why would you laugh at that? And why would Mel laugh and tell this story to his players? Well, the reason why Mel thought this was funny, and it is really funny, because when you're talking about someone of Mel Purcell's caliber, you're talking about the elite level, something that is the equivalent to winning the lottery. That's how good of a player Mel Purcell is. You got to put it in the context of what it takes to be good enough to reach the quarterfinals of Wimbledon. It is absolutely impossible to reach that level of the game if you have flaws in your technique. Now, mind you, Mel Purcell was an aggressive player, and he depended on his volleys. He would try to come to the net every chance he got. So obviously Mel Purcell was one of the best volleyers on the whole planet. And this person that Mel was hitting with had the audacity to try to correct Mel's volleys. So the way you have to look at this scenario is Mel Purcell's volleys are absolutely at the elite level, but maybe they don't represent your idea of what a volley should look like, and maybe you're thinking that this volley is wrong for that reason. But the way I look at tennis is in the following way. If someone is truly the best in the world at a specific shot, rather than trying to correct this shot, I'm going to try to figure out what makes this shot so great and how I can teach this shot to other players. Now, the same can be said for John McEnroe's and Jimmy Connors' forehand, but obviously this forehand doesn't exist anymore. There's nobody on the ATP or the WTA, there's even nobody in Division I college that will hit the forehand like this without a loop and close to a continental grip and with a very limited amount of body involvement. This type of forehand doesn't exist anymore. So it is logical, and that's the reason why I made this video. It is a logical question that maybe someone should try to help Johnny Mac and Jimmy Connors, and I'm laughing, then fix their forehand. Teach them a modern forehand. Maybe Johnny Mac should switch over to a semi-western grip and start building a loop into his swing and change his forehand accordingly, maybe he would be playing better tennis. And I'm going to explain why I'm laughing, because I would pay good money to see someone go up to John McEnroe and try to teach him the forehand. This would be really fun to watch, and I would love to see John McEnroe's reaction. So here are my reasons why I don't think that both Jimmy Connors and John McEnroe could improve their forehand technique if they adapted the modern forehand. And the reason number one is their overall game style. You have to understand that John McEnroe especially is looking to take the ball early. He's not looking to be far behind the baseline. He's looking to take the ball early and get to the net. So his technique kind of matches his game style. He's always played like that. So in order for him to develop a fuller swing, he would probably have to stand a little further back behind the baseline in order to have time to execute such a swing. You got to remember that modern tennis game is played further behind the baseline than the classic tennis game. The classic tennis game was indeed a game where the vast majority of players, of course we're excluding the clay court specialists, but the vast majority of players who had success at the top of the game were serve and volley players, or players who like to play close to the baseline and take the ball extremely early. This has changed with modern tennis. The swings have become bigger, the body involvement has become more pronounced, and therefore players need a little bit more time, and they generally stand further behind the baseline. Also, that results in more power, more pace, and generally when there's more pace, players need more time, and now it's played much further behind the baseline than it used to. So for Johnny Mac to adapt a new forehand technique, he would not only have to change technique, but he would probably have to change his game style and stand further back, and that just doesn't make sense in the type of player that John McEnroe and Jimmy Connors is. Both of these guys are aggressive players, and they're looking to stand close to the baseline and play aggressive tennis that depends often on the pace of the incoming ball, and they're looking to come to the net as often as possible, especially when we're talking about John McEnroe. Another reason why Connors and McEnroe would have a hard time changing to a modern forehand is their grip, and there's a lot of muscle memory involved in a grip. You got to realize that these guys have had millions upon millions of repetitions with their grip, and now when they change to a modern grip, it's not as easy as changing the grip, because what changes with a more modern grip is also the angle of the wrist at contact. So this is something that's a very long process. What happens with the vast majority of players, if they, for example, have a more conventional grip closer to continental, and they change to, say, let's say, a more western grip, they will likely be in the same position at contact in regards to their wrist. So when you strike a ball with a continental grip, you can see that my wrist is behind the racket, my knuckle, base knuckle, that is on top of the racket. So there's a certain wrist position, and this is in your muscle memory because you've hit this way a million times. Now that you change it over to more of a western grip, you're likely going to remain in the same position, but unfortunately the racket face is very close, and now you're either going to hit the ball into the ground or you're going to hit the ball very thin and you're going to lack power. So this is a long process, and it would take years to get rid of this muscle memory that's present because of the grip. So for that reason, it's going to be very difficult for someone like John McEnroe and Jimmy Connors to change their forehand. In fact, if they did change their grip, they would make their forehands a lot worse. And we're talking about the way modern players take the racket back with a loop. I'm sure that McEnroe and Connors could do this. They could do a loop, but again, what I said before is very important, because with a bigger backswing, you need more time. And they would probably have to change their position in the court, and they would overall have to change their whole game style. And this is probably something that wouldn't suit them well, because the way their technique developed is based on their game style, which is an offensive game style that's played close to the baseline. So for that reason, even though I do believe that both Connors and McEnroe could probably mimic a modern forehand and do quite well, I don't think it would be good for the game, because they probably need a little bit more time, and they would play further back, which defeats the purpose and takes out the best qualities of their game, which is taking the ball early and finishing the point off closer to the net. But the important question is, what about you guys that are watching this video? Maybe you have a traditional forehand, and maybe you should change to more of a modern forehand. And the question that I always ask is, how long have you been playing with this technique? And the more time that you have spent on the court with a certain technique, the more difficult it is going to be to change it to a different technique, because muscle memory is something that's very difficult to get rid of. Maybe you have played tennis for 30, 40 years. If that's the case, It's going to be very tough to change the grip. It's going to be very tough to add the loop. This is going to be a big time investment, maybe a year of training, maybe 2 years of training to have your body memorize these movements and therefore build this new muscle memory. Maybe it's not going to be worth it because it might not necessarily improve your game that much, because most likely you have made different adaptations that you might not be conscious of, just like McEnroe and Connors, where you're playing tennis a certain way because of your technique. Maybe your court positioning is different, maybe how you time the ball is different. It's all related to the way you execute your forehand. You guys that have been playing tennis for only a few years, you have not built up that much muscle memory, and you should definitely change to a modern forehand. Why do I say that? Because, guys, there's no doubt about it. As much as I respect Connors and McEnroe, their forehands are nothing compared to the modern forehands. If we compare it to the big three, Nadal, Djokovic, and Federer, McEnroe and Connors' forehand is not even close to the quality of the forehand of the big three. The modern forehand is much better in all aspects, especially when we're talking about power and control. So everybody should try to adapt the modern forehand. However, I understand that muscle memory is something that's very difficult to get rid of, and for you guys that have been playing tennis your whole life, you have to make the hard decision. If your forehand is working well, it might not be worth putting in all that effort and changing to a modern forehand. However, at any stage of the game, even if you've been playing tennis for 40 years and your forehand is not working, here's where I would suggest to you that since your forehand is not working, you're having big problems, you should definitely change it to a modern forehand, because you're going to be recalibrating your forehand. So the distinction that I'm making here is players with a classic forehand who are hitting it well, if they make a change, they're going to make their forehands worse immediately because of all the things that I mentioned in this video. But for the players that have trouble on their forehand and they have classic characteristics, they're going to have to recalibrate their forehand regardless, independent of how much muscle memory they built up. So for you guys, when you develop a new forehand, you should absolutely develop a modern forehand.